The story that I want to share with you today took place almost 11 years ago. It was at the end of the my first quarter at UC Davis as I was preparing to head home for the winter holiday. I was excited because I was going to be able to see a lot of my friends for the first time since we all had set off for our various schools. It was Friday when my parents picked me up at noon, and by 2 o'clock in the afternoon I was at home sitting in my old room. Shortly thereafter, my brother called me from the pool. He wanted to know if I wanted to join in an impromptu water polo game with a lot of our old friends from high school. Now, my brother Kevin is only about 2 years younger than I am. So while we were both in high school, we both swam and played water polo, meaning that we had a lot of the same friends. Now, I thought the game sounded like a lot of fun, so I grabbed my suit and a towel and I headed down to the pool. It was at our high school where we both were actually lifeguards during the summer. I feel very lucky that my senior year water polo season was spent with a really great group of guys. We had a great season and ended up winning our league at the end. Now, both Kevin and I were very fortunate that in the 2 years that we played together, neither of us sustained any serious injuries. For those of you who aren't familiar with water polo, this is a pretty significant accomplishment. To put things in perspective, I know football players who literally cringe at the thought of getting into a water polo game. But this was to be a fun game between friends. So while everyone would be playing hard, no one would really be playing violent. It felt absolutely great to be back in the water, playing a game that I love so much. Though we probably only played for about 30 minutes, it felt like the time was both flying by and standing still. As time was running out, my team ended up with the ball. And I figured we had time for one last play, so we tried to get something running, but the other team countered us, and we were left with having to reset, and I ended up with the ball at about 7 meters out from the wall and from the goal, and with Kevin guarding me. Being that we are siblings close in age, Kevin and I did at that age what pretty much all siblings do best. We compete. Now, we both really enjoy winning, and we enjoy it especially when it comes at the sake of the other one. In that light, what happened next is pretty much inevitable. Now, I wanted to figure I could just lob the ball up for one last play and let everyone scrum for it. So what I did was, with Kevin guarding me close, I pushed back away from him, got up out of the water, and lobbed the ball up high. But as I was doing this, he came with me, got himself up higher out of the water, leaned out over me, got his arms up, and tried to block the ball. Now, he did miss the ball, but he found my hand. What happened was, as he was coming down, and as my arm was following through, the middle finger on my right hand slid into the bottom of his left eye socket. Now, it's a sensation that I will definitely never forget, but luckily my finger slid back out just as fast as it had gone in. My stomach did turn over a little bit, but luckily the combined 8 years of lifeguarding experience we had between the two of us kicked in. Even before he came up out of the water, I was already starting to move in a position where I could help him, and while he was covering his eye with one hand, I helped him over to the side of the pool. It took him a few tries, but we were eventually able to get him out of the water, get him bundled up in towels, and into the lifeguard office, where we had our manager help check him out. Once we had determined that I hadn't actually put his eye out, I immediately got on the phone with our parents. I let them know what had happened, and that he would probably have to go to see the doctor to just make sure that he didn't have any serious damage that we weren't able to easily see. I also let them know that one of them probably wanted to drive his car home. 20 minutes later, my mom was taking him to the doctor's office while my dad and I were taking care of the cars. We found out later that no serious damage had been done, but that he did actually start to go a little bit into shock. Now this happened right before the winter holiday, so what ended up happening was Kevin had a really nasty black eye and a pool of blood at the bottom of his eyeball for about 2 weeks. I can tell you those were some pretty unforgettable Christmas pictures that year. When we later sat down and pieced it all together, Kevin and I determined that there were 2 factors there that probably saved his eye from getting poked out. The first was that he managed to close his eye before my finger poked into it, which means that I only made actual contact with his lower eyelid. The second was that the angle of that my finger went into his eye was such that it went underneath and merely pushed it up into the top of the eye socket. As far as we're concerned, that's pretty much a best case scenario as far as eye gouges go. After that, we didn't really compete against each other in sports. We figured it was probably just too dangerous. Instead, our competitive natures turned to video games, and that's where they've stayed ever since. One thing's for sure though, it's an experience that neither of us will ever forget. Thanks for listening.